You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello everyone, thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hello everybody, welcome to the show. I want to start things off by saying some things a little different this week. Of course, Victoria is not here, so we have another special guest. We have Maura Armstrong from All Around Science Podcast. Do you want to say hello?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for being here to bring more strange, weird science topics to the masses. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, I mentioned who you are and what podcast you're with, but tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I am Maura, a general science enthusiast. That's been a lifelong thing for me.
That.
Yes. And a friend
Excellent.
of mine, Bobby, and I, we met up at Gen Con in 2019.
Nice.
And hung out for a bit. And instead of talking about gaming the whole time, talked about science. So we thought, I wonder if people would want to hear us do this every week if we recorded these conversations. And so we started doing that and started All Around Science back in 2020. And here we are.
Amazing.
So yeah, we are just a general kind of science podcast. So we talk about, we love talking about brains. We love talking about tiny robots.
That's because they're so weird.
All sorts of weird. Yeah, right? They're both
Now,
so weird.
Point of clarification. Do you talk about tiny robots with brains or tiny brains with robots?
Oh, we haven't had a crossover yet.
All right, maybe someday.
If
Life
that
goals,
happens, I don't know. I think there's going to be fireworks or something because that would be very exciting.
Kirk,
Those sound like
that's
that's an
AI.
exciting mashup.
I think
Really,
that's AI.
yeah.
I mean, oh boy,
What is
I'll debate you on that, and we'd have a whole show just on that.
Well, maybe we'll have to have you on sometime, and you can
Absolutely,
we can talk
yeah.
AI. But yeah, it's a really fun show. We love we do a deep dive every week, and we talk about science news as well. So would love to have some of your listeners stop on by. I'm sure one or two of your listeners are science nerds.
Oh, at least
yeah,
one or
it's,
two.
One or two.
Yeah.
One or two. I think that's fair to say. Yep. Well, great. Thanks again for being here. I'm going to kick things off this week. And I'll say, if you were around my age, you likely saw the award-winning 1986 hit movie Stand By Me. Anyone seen that one?
It sounds
I'm sorry.
familiar. I don't think I've seen
I'm sure
it.
somebody
Heard the song?
somebody in the audience.
Oh, yeah.
You heard what?
There's a
I've
song.
heard- we've
right?
heard the
Stand By
song.
Me. Is that the same thing?
Absolutely, yeah. And the song kind of plays a role in the film. If you haven't seen it, it's a really great film. It won all kinds of awards. There was lots of memorable scenes. It's basically a story about these young 12-year-old boys who are having to go on this sort of coming of age journey, actually to go find a dead body. It's very strange. It's
Amazing.
based on a Stephen King.
It was
Stephen
the
King
80s.
short story called The Body. Yeah. It's very much 80s. But actually it's set like in the 1950s is when it's set. So
Okay.
there's a lot of like memorable scenes, but there's one that is very much burned into my brain. The boys have to wade through a shallow body of water on their great epic journey. And upon coming out the other side, one of them yells, "Leeches!"
There it is.
And yeah, they peel off their clothes trying to find them all. They're like stuck to their back and their legs and their neck, and they're huge and they're bloody.
Okay.
And the lead character is played by a very young Will Wheaton. And he discovers that one of them has somehow made it all the way through and under his underwear and attached to the worst possible location.
I'm thinking of like
not showing this on
three
screen.
different options for this location.
I have one main one that's thinking.
They don't specify other than to say it was in a certain region.
All
You
right,
don't want to
okay.
find a giant leech. those of you who've seen this, like you're like, oh yeah, no, this scene makes quite an impression. It kept a whole generation of kids from ever considering playing in or near water. It was kind of terrifying. So this week, let's talk about leeches. That's my subject. Oh man, leeches are certainly strange creatures. They're also ones that cause considerable heebie-jeebies. I told my wife I was doing this as my topic this week while she was sitting on the sofa, and she like visibly shivered and made like a strange noise. So
I mean, I
like
also
leeches.
did similar motions just now.
Yeah, kind of like full body shudder. I think the main reason is that they're bloodsuckers. And what don't we like? Mosquitoes, ticks, and leeches, right? Things that steal our blood, we generally aren't a fan of.
Well, I
But
mean,
people don't
Kirk, our
get, like,
blood should stay in our bodies. That's where it's supposed
correct.
to be.
That's a strong
Closed system.
human need to keep the blood inside our bodies, and in a specific part of our bodies, not just floating around. But here's the thing: like you think about mosquitoes, ticks, and leeches. People don't usually get squeamish about mosquitoes, right? Unless you kind of smack one and smear some blood on your arm. But even that's not as like, it's not the same as that visceral like ugh of a leech. So I think part of it is leeches have no legs. They slither. They seem slimy and wet. They stick to us. They suck our blood. They really just tick all the boxes for being like gross, right?
They're kind of like water snakes or sorts.
Yeah. The more I think about
like
this, more I'm
snakes.
thinking like maybe I should have saved this for our Halloween show, but we're just going for it. So we all know that leeches suck our blood, but that's actually kind of a misconception. There's 680 different species of leeches that have been identified in the world. 65 of them live in North America, where we're recording here, and not all of them are sanguivores or blood eaters.
Right.
While it's common for leeches to suck blood, not all of them do. And humans are usually not even the preferred host, even when they do suck blood. Some of them are host specific. They only want the blood from certain things. So leeches will attach to fish, turtles, and other animals. And they're even, here's the big thing here. There are even terrestrial leeches. That's right.
Oh, I don't
leeches that don't have to be in the water.
Are they just in the ground?
They're crawling around on the ground. Yeah, they don't
on
live
the
in water
ground,
at all.
not in the ground, on the ground. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So they live on land, and they mostly hunt things like snails. I will point out this is mostly in the tropics. So that's when I learned
Where
that
it's
I was
wet
like,
enough for them to be able to.
yeah, that's probably
Right.
part of it. But there is an asterisk by that we're going to come back to. So they're hunting down not just snails, but even mammals. There was one study I found from Vietnam where they did some really cool science. They took blood from terrestrial leeches and were able to isolate DNA from them and figure out what they had been feeding on. So they found blood from rabbits, deer, badgers, and even a goat-like creature called a serow.
Okay.
So yeah, we're not even safe from leeches on land. Oh, but Kirk, you say, I don't live in the tropics. Well, here's that little asterisk for you.
Oh, boy.
Scientists have now identified 3 species of terrestrial leeches right here in North America. One was discovered in New Jersey
Kirk,
in
why?
2009. Oh, just wait, Rachel. It's also the largest leech in North America,
No.
coming in at 30 centimeters or about
Oh,
11
no.
inches long.
How did it take
No.
us till 2009 to find this
That's an
leech?
excellent
Right?
question.
Someone
That is a
found
large
it in their
leech.
yard while they were mowing the lawn.
Oh,
It's
Was
an
this
almost
just a
foot
large
long-
specimen, or is this?
No, it's not. They collected a whole bunch of them. Imagine an
Oh,
almost
no.
foot-long terrestrial leech in New Jersey.
Huh.
Don't put that in your hot dog bun. Not the kind of foot-long that we're looking
No,
for.
Kirk, no.
Now the good news. The good news, they don't attack humans. So we got that going for us.
That's good.
I guess,
What-
yeah, that's
of
a
the-
silver
yeah.
lining.
But what do
Yeah,
they eat?
right? I couldn't find good information on that for what they were eating. So I'm not going to even speculate. So it's things that live on the land, though, I can tell you that.
Right.
Speaking of things living on the land, or kind of the opposite of that, of the 680 identified species, 100 of them live in salt water. So yes, there are even leeches in the ocean. Rachel, you're a big fan of the ocean.
I do love
do
the
you like
ocean.
that do you like that there are saltwater leeches, or would you prefer you didn't know that?
I mean, there's a lot of things I'd prefer not to know about the ocean that I already know. This
It's
can
quite
just
a
be
place.
added onto that list. It's fine.
Okay. So the blood sucking is the thing we all remember. So let's talk about that. So leeches are often species specific, like I said, which is part of why they aren't all attacking us all the time. When they do find a tasty human, though, they'll actually scrape at the skin. They're not really biting. They're kind of scraping, and they're going to scrape the skin until it starts to bleed. And then they suction cup themselves to the wound so they can drink up the blood. They actually release an anticoagulant called, I believe it's called hirudin, that keeps the blood flowing.
Okay.
And it takes between 20 and 60 minutes for a leech to feed, and then it will just detach itself. But you don't need to wait until that happens. Since they're not biting to stay on, it's just like a suction cup. You can actually just get your fingernail under them and pop them right off. I think part of the revulsion at leeches has to do with the anticoagulant. This is sort of my theory.
Probably,
here.
yeah.
So removing them is easy, and all they've really done is scratched you, right? And usually we don't freak out about a scratch, but because of the anticoagulant, the wound seems to bleed a lot more than you would expect from a scratch. So mentally seeing a lot of blood that doesn't seem to want to stop probably makes leeches seem worse than they really are, which is like, oh, something scratched me. I get scratched up in the woods all the time, and I'm not like, oh, the woods, no. So I think that's probably part of it. Now, I do have to share one lovely tidbit I came across while reading up on leeches for this week. And it came from the Wikipedia page. Remember how I said that they are easy to remove, right? That is the general consensus, but Wikipedia did offer this one horrifying sentence that I just absolutely had to share.
Oh, no.
Quote, internal attachments, such as inside the nose, are more likely to require medical intervention.
Oh, gosh.
That's not an okay sentence just to put out there into the world.
Oh,
I don't like that,
gosh.
Kurt. You're going to haunt my
Oh, my
dreams.
gosh. Now, there was a citation to a medical journal, so of course I had to click that. And it was treated to the lovely article, which is called Unilateral Epistaxis After Swimming in a Stream. And this was in the Hong Kong Medical Journal. Epistaxis is just a fancy medical way to say nosebleed. And the journal details a story of a 55-year-old woman who reported nosebleeds and nasal blockages. And they discovered a leech stuck up her nose, feeding on her meaty insides. And it had been there for a month.
Awful.
I'm not sure. It's not supposed to take that long to feed, so I don't know if it started feeding and then it couldn't get back out or just liked it there or what, but it had been there for a month. So luckily this is extremely rare. And the whole point of writing it up in a medical journal was because no one had ever heard of this happening before. So we got that going for us, but swimmers beware.
Great.
So
Love
look,
that.
that's what I got for you this week. Loads and loads of leeches. There's so much more we could talk about leeches, but we're going to stop there. My sources this week were the University of Wisconsin, Wikipedia, and a graduate thesis by Beth Ann Werchansky, which is I think how you say her name, which is where she describes her taxonomic work on that giant New Jersey land leech. So that was just kind of written up in someone's graduate thesis, which is pretty cool. So that's what I got.
Thanks, Kirk.
When you explain something and it kind of demystifies it and makes it less horrifying and gross, that didn't happen today.
It did not.
The opposite can also occur.
That was not the end result.
No, we didn't even go into all the medical leeches and stuff like that. That's
a whole thing, hey?
Oh my gosh.
God.
We'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have some more Strange by Nature for you. Strange by Nature podcast is brought to you by listeners like you who have joined the Society of Strange, our membership group on over at patreon.com/strangebynature. Society of Strange members can join at one of 3 different membership levels and help support the show and also get some fun stuff like water bottle stickers or access to super secret content. So a thank you to those who have joined already to help make this podcast possible. If you haven't joined yet, we'll see you soon over at the Society of Strange at patreon.com/strangebynature. See you soon.
All right, we're back. And I hope that there's a few people still listening after hearing about leeches. for a few minutes.
I think our listeners know what they're getting themselves into. I hope
so.
that's why they're here.
That's good.
So yeah,
That's good. I hope so too. I want to talk a little bit about glass frogs. Have either of you heard about glass frogs?
I have. I have to
Yeah,
take this
these are
off my
cool.
list. They're so cool.
They're very cool. If you Google glass frogs, you'll usually see a photo of a frog attached to a pane of glass. But that's not why they're called glass frogs. When you take the photo, you can see all of their insides. You can see their intestines, their heart. If they're a female, you can see eggs. They are
awesome.
almost completely transparent underneath. On top, on the back, most species of glass frogs, and there's about 150 of them. Most of them are a bright green. And they're not fully transparent from the back. They're kind of translucent. So they kind of have blurred edges. And you would think being transparent, that's a great way to hide, of course. Yeah. But translucent, why would translucent?
Yeah. But also, like, you could still see organs and things. So I feel like that's not
ideal.
You're
not
not seeing
ideal.
all the way through. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, translucent. You did mention, and maybe this is what you're getting at, but the kind of the blurriness of it. And I think about when things are kind of hard to, in nature, like the whole idea of camouflage and whatnot, if you can blur the lines, you can soften the edges, often the brain just sort of skips over that object and doesn't see it. So I would guess it maybe has something to do with that. But.
Well, it's really interesting because they have that, they blend in already with the bright green backs. But they did actually test this. Is it better to have a frog that looks very much like a leaf? It's opaque. So they created gelatin frogs, a group of scientists. Some that were opaque and some that were translucent. And the translucent ones lasted longer. They weren't targeted as frequently by predators because they call it edge diffusion.
Predators are like, what are these gummy bear frogs out here?
So this edge diffusion is basically just means it better blends. There's less contrast. So you're absolutely right. Perfect. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. And then it's also cool because the underneath of the frog is transparent. And so the light from the leaf reflects into the frog. And makes it closer to the color. Yeah.
Closer to the color. Yeah, that's wild.
It's really neat. But there's some recent research that I really wanted to talk about today. There is a type of glass frog, Fleischmanni glass frogs, that actually become more transparent while they're sleeping.
Wild.
Nice.
Isn't that...
That's so cool.
That's wild. Yeah. They're sleeping and become less pigmented. That's crazy.
And
okay, so that makes total sense. I say, do they know is the how? What
that means that
then?
they are actively thinking or controlling their pigment, right?
Are they controlling that? Yeah, exactly. So this was the question because they brought this frog. They had a few in captivity. And they observed this happening, and that's not something they had seen or noticed before. But when you see the contrast, when you see it happen, it's quite obvious. Even to the naked eye, you can actually see it become more transparent.
Very cool.
Wow.
So this was published in November of 2022, so just a few months ago.
Okay.
And to figure out how this was happening, they used a really cool kind of imaging technique called photoacoustic microscopy. And
sounds fun.
Right? I'm going to give you a quote from the National Geographic article that I read about this. This is a quote from the lead of this study, the lead scientist, Carlos Taboada. When pigments absorb light, part of the light that is absorbed then produces heat. And that heat creates a local change in pressure, which creates sound waves.
Okay.
Huh.
So the pigment absorbs light. Part of the light makes some heat that creates a pressure change. And then that pressure change generates sound. Now, it's not sound that you and I can hear.
Whoa. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So this is why we need tools to do it. Photoacoustic microscopy.
Right.
And you can measure, using this technique, you can measure transparency with not just light, but with sound waves.
Sure.
And what's really
Are
cool
these
about go
frogs
ahead.
using this as making their own sounds? Is that what's happening? They're sleeping, and so they don't want to really make any sounds.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I wonder if there's any creatures that can detect that sound
Huh.
because we can't, but I
That's
wonder
a
if there are. That's a
whole area of
really
research,
good
yeah.
question, Rachel. That was not one that was answered by this study. What they wanted to know was how they were creating this transparent effect.
How is a
Gotcha,
pretty
yeah.
important thing. Yes.
Yeah. So that was what they were studying.
that was
but
my
that's
first question,
a really
yeah.
interesting thought. Yeah, definitely room for more research. So what's cool about this technique too is that it works on hemoglobin in blood cells. So for
Okay.
those who don't know, that's the red pigment that holds oxygen in our blood. And what they found was that the distribution of oxygenated hemoglobin through the frog decreased by 96.6% when they were sleeping.
Ooh, wow.
That's not great.
Okay.
That's a lot of not oxygenated blood there.
Yeah. This is
Yeah, normally that would seem like a really bad outcome.
it doesn't sound good. It sounds really terrible. But frogs do this. Like frogs can freeze themselves. They can hibernate. They do
Yeah,
all
yeah.
sorts of crazy things. And so it's a little bit different than us. If that happened to us, I think that means you're
You'd be
pretty
dead.
much done.
Not
You're
great.
dead. Yeah.
You're dead. Yeah.
But here's the big question: Where did all that blood go? Blood is not
Right.
transparent. It is really quite opaque, in fact, and so it has to go somewhere, and it's hiding somewhere in this frog. They figured out
Right.
that it was 89% of their blood, a total of 89% of their blood, was being diverted into their liver. And
Why?
Well, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
so in the liver, they have like sacs, like containers for blood.
Uh-huh.
But there's two problems here. One is blood is still opaque, and now
Right.
it's concentrated in this one spot. So why don't we have this dark spot, where
Yeah,
the liver
it
is?
should be even more visible, right? Super
Exactly,
dense.
exactly. They figured this out. The sacs are lined with reflective crystals. So you know how
Of course they are.
Yeah.
Of course
Yeah.
they are.
crazy, right?
Gosh.
So this is a similar effect to like at nighttime when you shine a light on an animal's eyes. Some of them have eye shine, that reflective
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
retina. Yeah. But there's a second problem here. Why doesn't it clot?
Yeah, that's a lot of
Sure,
blood
yeah.
in a liver.
Yes. And they don't know why. That is the big next question. And what's crazy about this research is it's an incredible opportunity because we know glass frogs, their blood does clot when they're wounded. They have that ability, but they are somehow stopping it from clotting every night, every time they sleep, or during the day. I think they're nocturnal.
Uh-huh.
And then they successfully bring it back out, most of their blood, and do it all again in the next 24 hours. And this is huge because clots, you may know, are a huge problem when it comes to health.
Yeah.
You don't want
Yeah.
them in the wrong place.
I wonder if they have some way, because it's the platelets in your blood that cause the clotting. So I'm wondering if there's somehow they're taking like the red blood cells back into the liver, but leaving the platelets out in the plasma. And that's like, there's some sort of filtering mechanism to not bring pack all the platelets in too.
Maybe.
might-
Oh,
I really don't. I
interesting.
have to admit, I don't. It's too bad Victoria's not here this week. She may have more insight into this. But the idea of, you're generally when things are going well, you don't get blood clots, in your blood. I'm not really sure what the triggering mechanism of platelets is. Is it exposure to oxygen? Is it the density packing in? Like that'd be interesting to know what that triggering mechanism is, and that may have something to do with it.
Clotting is really complex, and there's 13
Yeah.
different factors with at least two different states, and they all interact in such a really complicated way that you wouldn't know exactly which factor immediately is causing it to remain unclotted.
Interesting.
So there's definitely no silver bullet for this, but it could be. That platelet theory is really interesting. Another thing, aspirin will make your platelets kind of like slippery, so maybe they have something going on there.
Oh, interesting.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Well, that's
yeah.
the thing about like evolution. This could evolve to happen. it's going to do so in a way that works. And so it's that the mystery becomes like, well, how, like, there might be multiple ways that it could have happened, but it only happened one way in the glass frog. So we got to figure out what that one way was,
Yeah, it has a
That's
lot
what
of
the fun mystery of science is figuring out, we know what happened, but how? Like,
How did that
Exactly.
happen?
Exactly. Yes. So glass frogs, you thought they were cool, and now they're even cooler.
Oh, thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Maura. Just
Isn't that crazy?
oh,
It's
that's
just
wild.
mind blowing.
Oh,
Super
wild.
cool. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll have a third story from Rachel.
Hey, listener, are you the kind of person who's like curious about things? Like, do you ever just wonder how or why something is the way that it is? Like how are clouds made? I've got a podcast for you. It's called All Around Science. It's a weekly science podcast where me and my co-host Maura geek out about the interesting science-y things that we've been thinking and learning about. So I know you're curious about things. So are we. Let's be curious together. Listen to All Around Science where podcasts are listened to, or go to allaroundscience.com.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So Maura, it's very interesting that you decided to talk about frogs today, because I actually want to talk a little bit about it's called a toad.
Oh, okay.
That has some really fascinating adaptations. So it's a really extreme case of like a motherly love, at least from like a human's perspective. So we're going to go down, cross the Gulf of Mexico, and we're going to head out down to South America, where
Gotcha.
the three of us were exploring the Amazon rainforest, which obviously I feel like we need to feature more on this show because it's the Amazon rainforest.
Amazing place.
Amazing place. So many different cool adaptations. But we're exploring some of the more slower moving creeks and streams. And I point out what looks to be a leaf floating in the water.
I would assume there's lots of leaves floating in the water.
Right? We're in a rainforest. But we take a closer look, and it's very clearly a very flat toad, about 4 to 8 inches long.
Oh, wow.
How flat
So-
are we talking?
Real flat. Like its legs, and both of its front and back legs are like, I'll get into it. It's probably, I can't describe it. It's very flat. Like, you know how you think of like toads as being like really round?
Yeah, they're the most bulbous and
Exactly.
they're not real svelte usually
They've
looking.
got
They're-
bulk.
Right.
Yeah.
This does not
They're
have
big
that.
boned. They're big boned.
Right. The head of this particular toad is triangular. It has the tiniest of eyes, and its skin is kind of a variation of brown, so that way it helps camouflage and make it look like a floating leaf. All right.
Okay.
What we're looking at is the Suriname toad, also known as the star-fingered toad, Pippa pippa.
Oh,
very cute.
I did love when the genus and species epithets are like the same, like cardinalis, bison. That just makes my life easier.
Ursa. Bufo,
Yeah.
bufo. So good.
Bufo.
So generally speaking, it's an aquatic toad. So it mostly spends pretty much all of its time in the water. And there's a few things besides that make this toad strange. So, like I was saying, instead of that typical frog toad pose where they like sit and their back legs are all bent and it's like leapfrog, you know? These toads sit like they're competing in the plank challenge from 2012. Just full on as flat as they possibly can get. There are both their front and back legs just straight out, very plank-like. They also have no tongue, So they actually have to use
Really?
suction to bring prey in. Yeah, so they are ambush
Okay,
predators, but
weird.
they don't have a
Weird.
tongue. It's so weird. But what's really wild about these frogs, or about these toads, I should say,
Yeah.
is their mating strategy. So to attract the females, males will snap their hyoid bone to make a really sharp, like metallic click noise. So they'll do this in the water to attract a female, which also I don't like that they're snapping or like bending their hyoid bone. That feels important.
Feels
I
a
have a
little weird.
question. Where is
Yes.
the hyoid bone?
Good question. So a hyoid bone, humans have it too. It's in your throat. So
Okay.
it is near your mouth. Like it's in with the like the voice box.
Okay.
Generally speaking, a hyoid bone is a hyoid bone is a really fragile piece of bone. Like not to go there, but I'm gonna go there when they're looking at like strangulation victims for murders and
geez.
stuff.
Mhm.
If that's been broken.
If that's been broken, that's how they know, rather than suffocation
Interesting.
kind of thing. Sorry,
So
y'all.
when you say snapping, are you talking like a flicking guitar string type snap, or like it can't be breaking, is it?
No, they're not breaking it. It's like a guitar
Okay.
string like snap.
Oh, okay.
So they're
Snapping it like
flicking
that.
it.
Okay.
They're able to
Plucking it,
flick,
perhaps. Yeah.
flick their hyoid bone to make this really sharp click noise.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. That's way better than what I was picturing.
Right? Rather than breaking it into little bitty pieces. Yeah.
That sounds horrible.
So Suriname toads use amplexus, which isn't that strange when it comes to like a lot of aquatic creatures, especially like toads or frogs. Amplexus is...
Okay, you got to explain what that is, right?
Yes.
Good. I am. Yes. So amplexus is where the male of the species will hold on and attach to the female, like generally on her back, for a long period of time. Like their limbs lock in place and they can't be removed. In this particular case, it's for up to 12 hours as they mate in the water, and quite literally are like flipping around while they're doing this.
Well, what a nice tie into our Valentine's episode.
I was gonna use this after our Valentine's Day. And I
would've
still am,
been-
technically.
Yeah. Jeez.
Oh, it gets better. So all of this is
Yeah,
happening.
I've seen the photos. I know where this is going.
Oh, good.
I'm in the dark. I'm following. I'm following along. I trust you, Rachel.
I'm not.
You
I'm not
should.
too
Oh no,
sure where
no!
this is going.
Kirk's expression does not look positive.
It's not.
Oh, no.
You shouldn't trust me. So what happens as this is as they're mating for up to 12 hours, which what a long time to do that. The females will
Wow.
release anywhere from 60 to 100 eggs. And then the males will fertilize those eggs while in the water and still attached to the female. So amplexus is a way for toads and frogs to ensure that the mating is that it's their babies kind of thing.
Right.
Sure.
Then this is why I said you shouldn't trust me, because the eggs will then kind of float over and embed themselves into the female's back.
Oh.
Like her back gets completely covered by eggs, right?
Yeah. Completely
So
covered.
How does
Oh,
that
wait.
happen? How do the eggs get on? Oh, like they don't float away in the water. They are.
They don't float away.
deposited.
They're
Got it.
depositive. Because remember, this is a slow moving, very like gentle
Yeah.
type space. So she'll lay those eggs, and then the fertilized eggs will attach themselves to her back, and then her skin will grow around them to make a pocket for each egg.
It looks
kind
like
of
they're
like a
sinking down
honeycomb.
into her skin. Like
It does, but her skin is actually growing up around them, kind of like a
Okay.
honeycomb kind of
Sure,
situation.
Sure.
The pictures of this particular toad went around, I think, a couple years ago, because people really, really don't like things that
oh,
have holes in them.
yeah, that's the trypophobia.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
if
It
you-
is very gross.
If you have that, then do not look at a picture of this toad because
Yeah, maybe avoid our Instagram post this week.
yeah, if you're not a fan of honeycombs or lotus,
The one lotus, yeah.
seed pods, like anything like that, that's like the
In
toad's
for.
back. It's pretty gross, and I'm okay with most of that stuff, but it's pretty gross looking.
Yeah, it is. And then, so she will, for the next 3 to 4 months, she will actually carry these young in her back. And they don't go through like traditional complete metamorphosis. They will like stay in her back in their little pods that are kind of covered, and she really is there to help protect them and make sure that they go on to the next phase of life. And after the 3 to 4 months are done, then they will just emerge from her back as little toadlets about an inch long. And off into the world they go. And yes,
Wow.
that is horrifying to watch.
Does she make it? Does the mother survive
Yes.
this process? Really?
Yeah.
It almost sounds like they're like. It almost sounds like they're feeding from
like,
her, which kind of is what.
Right?
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
like
it sounds
she's
like gross.
right, and like yeah.
So
it's not-
okay. This is quite gross, but I have
Yes.
2 children. I've been pregnant twice.
Exactly.
And that also is super duper gross when you really think about what's happening. It doesn't
Sure.
look
Yeah, fair
you can't
enough.
see it. I think that's the difference. You can't see the
The child seeping
The child.
calcium from your bones. Yeah.
but it's happening. And so having experienced this, I'm kind
Certainly
of
is
like, all
happening,
right,
yeah.
I mean, that's gross, but it sounds familiar.
So it's
a
pretty
lot
much
of-
that. It's just out
yeah.
of her back rather than, out of a vagina.
There
Which-
we go. Wow.
Fair. And like I didn't say, I'll end this on a really nice little note. Like there's a reason why they're called like why they're called star-fingered toads. At the end of each of their little like fingers are little like it looks like the ends of their fingers look like stars.
That's really cool.
Aw.
That's pretty much what it is, which is really cute. And they use their fingers to kind of
I don't think
search
it makes
and
up
hunt
for the
things, but
the baby holes covering their back. Like
no, it really doesn't.
the worst
But
is
I
there's some
tried.
pictures of like when the babies have come out and there's just like empty holes all over their back.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Those are the toughest pictures, I think.
I agree.
Look them up, folks.
It'll be on our Instagram and Facebook pages, and absolutely our Mastodon probably. But that's what I have for you
Yeah,
this
yeah,
week.
we'll get it there.
It's a
That is
clever
astounding.
strategy. If you are
Yeah.
essentially an island on a river, that seems like a good way to protect your young. You're not leaving them behind. You've got all the
Yeah,
defenses.
take 'em with ya.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like it works out really well, but it's also,
Kind of
from
gross.
a human perspective, very gross and kind of horrifying.
There's a
so-
podcast right now where all these toads are hearing about humans and the human birthing process, and they're
placentas.
like, "Oh my
yeah.
god, placental mammals are gross!
Ah,
Wow. Horrifying."
absolutely disgusting. Yeah, awful. So my sources this week were Wikipedia. The San Diego Zoo had a really, really great. They had a really great animal bio for this particular one, as well as the USGS had a really good article about the Suriname frog. So Suriname toad, I should say. So that's all that I believe that we have this week. Maura, where
Yes.
can people find you? Stalk you? What do you got to plug?
Oh, please don't stalk her.
I
Please
prefer
don't
no
stalk,
stalking.
actually.
Yeah,
Please
that's
don't stalk
me. Yeah.
definitely my preference.
No,
But
yeah, no
if
stalking.
you want to find out more about All Around Science, that is our website, allaroundscience.com, where you can find us on Facebook and Discord under the same name, All Around Sci, on Twitter and TikTok. And you can find us wherever fine podcasts are sold, whatever streaming service you use. We're on there. So we would love to hear from your listeners if they enjoyed today. And I did talk a little bit about glass frogs and transparent animals a few weeks ago. So if you want to learn a little more about glass frogs, then you can hop on and look for the episode about transparency.
Sweet. Well, thank you
Thanks for
very
being
much
on.
for joining us. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.
Laura. Why did I say Laura?
It's okay. It happens a lot.
Take it again.
Well, that's all we have this week. Maura, what am I doing?
You're not awake yet, is what's
It's okay.
going
It's
on.
all good.
Yeah, I've not had coffee
Third time's a
yet.
charm.
Well, that's all we have for this week. Maura, my goodness. Well, that's all we have this week. Maura. God damn it. The last
Dude,
second,
this
I
is-
always like overthink it. Okay.
I should just include all of these, in the
Yeah.
outtakes or something.
Just rough today. I haven't had coffee yet.